It goes to standards.
Okay.
So then when Pat hired, then Peter, I made everything up.
This time of year, you get away with it.
Lost a lot of weight.
Long way, really big old view. I mean, how old are you?
That's Friday.
Is that right?
Thanksgiving weekend.
He's happy.
We drove on Friday night.
He told me
Went to the first march on Monday.
Rotator cuff. How's it going?
It's going great.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's going great when he says, will you grab me, or you hand me that?
Yeah.
He is
Can't reach out.
fiercely
You don't
independent.
want to see anybody.
Got one good.
He's pretty good. He's probably bigger than my Jeep.
Ain't on study blocks or whatever area.
6 foot long.
My problem would be that this thing's I can't even sign.
I know.
Just don't work our way around. Thank you, one time.
I hear you.
Backward.
They all.
How's business? You still got that? No, you sold it.
So it's great.
It's great. Kids grown, out the house?
I saw Natalie at work the other day.
Dropped that call back.
She likes it, but that's not what she was like. She started to really like the old man. I told her. She done the middle school, come on. I can't, you was. You were one of them kids. And did Hey, Walter. How are you? Hey, how are you?
They have
It was a good day.
Well,
It was a good day.
You got some trouble. You got trouble tonight.
get out. Around. We didn't quite get to that end. We thought of, we had a good time.
No keys,
Well,
nothing.
good.
Oh,
No.
Larry said that I can't ask any questions. I'm
Who said
so
that?
happy to see you.
That's why it's so nice and warm.
Then, okay.
Surprised I hear on one man.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike's walking.
Like, it's a one day.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mike, yes. No, you're sick.
Fine.
You're not.
That's
Well, then, what I think on that side, there's a reason, there's a reason. There's a reason. Y'all lefties, stickies. You need to come over here, let me sit on the right. And make the right side. If it didn't matter, you're gonna say it.
I don't know if it's here, it looks like a 5 o'clock shadow.
Oh, yeah, you're late. It's cold.
You'll be gone when I get done.
Good to see y'all.
I called notice on the shape November last year, what day, second. I ain't gonna tell you who done that.
Walk right.
Oh. He just won't do it.
Mark, I put some extra stuff over there, stuff we got in the mail for you to have, it's got a sticky note on it. Yeah, that's just stuff for you to take with you, the sticky note is for, Michael O'Quinn's coming, other people from NCG. So I just wanted to let you know. If you want, to be in or help.
I think that would be a good day with Michael here.
Yeah.
He's a good guy.
I don't like him many decades ago. He is a good guy, he's a real good guy.
They're excited.
Yeah, I'm working with somebody who's Mary Beth Brown. We've been working together a lot. They want to do theirs in about.
No, it's free. Oh, yeah, the dues.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, each one of those people have their own unique thing to it too. The ones that we find the most falls in line.
Yeah. See, they got 3 or 4 lawyers like that, so I don't want to do that. Usually they're minor.
Well, those is the two partners.
Yeah, that's.
Bill Toomey is more
Yeah, I got
specific in structure. In this area. In that area.
Or no, they go for a lawyer, they go, sure.
Really big. We did.
I'll start that in the morning. I can never have. That's why I think
I'd like to welcome everybody to the Madison County Board of Commissioners Agenda Setting Work Session, December 5th, 2022 at 6 p.m. Let me silence that before it goes off. I'm going to start off with the chairman's report. I'll be brief. First off, I want to congratulate the city of Comer and the city of Colbert pulling off tremendous. It was great. The city of Colbert tree lighting ceremony was phenomenal. The weather broke just in time for the parade in Comer, and it was packed. I was really shocked to know that it rained within 15 minutes of the parade starting and every street was lined. I was fortunate enough to ride with Sheriff Moore I think it's the police that draw the lights, that draw the attention, but it's a good day. Comprehensive Plan Open House will be held on Thursday, December 8th. Drop in anytime between 4 and 7 at the old gymnasium out back. The deadline for public comment is December 12th. The draft plan will be posted on the Madison County's website under madisoncounty-compplan.com website tomorrow. So for y'all, I know there's a bunch of you in this room following the comprehensive plan. You should be able to find it there tomorrow afternoon. The BOC is still hiring a finance director. You can submit the application to the Human Resource Office from Government Complex. The Madison County First Program is holding free pictures with Santa on December 16th at 1 p.m. until 4 p.m. Again, out back in the Danielsville Gym. Children of all ages are welcome to take pictures with Santa Claus and an ornament to take home. You can make donations to the Madison County First Program. The Reindeer Run was held this past Saturday. It was a successful event with 175 runners, and they did run in the rain. Gentlemen, before you had a breakdown from Shelley Parham as far as the Reindeer Run and all the soccer playoffs that took place over the weekend. It was a busy weekend for Madison County. I want to say, I'm going to look on this right fast. It doesn't show me the total names of or number of teams, but for some reason, I thought there was like 14. There it is, 14 teams throughout the state of Georgia. So it was a big event held here in the county. Danielsville's Christmas lighting will be this coming Saturday between 4 and 6. The tree lighting will be at 7 p.m. Expecting large crowds, lots of vendors. Y'all please come out and attend. 4,876 people early voted in Madison County last week. Polls open tomorrow from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Lord, please vote. This will be at your local precincts tomorrow. With that being said, in the chairman's report, business involving guest groups and multiple visitors. We have Kenneth Confair from Arpeggio. Am I correct?
No.
No?
Over two. Cunifer from Arpeggio.
Oh, we always.
What he said, about our noise ordinance presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you for having me here tonight. High-level overview tonight, what I'm going to be talking about is the objective of the ordinance we've drafted for you. Run through a high-level structure of that ordinance, and then get into a little bit of more detail of the ordinance. Fundamental objective was to, as framed, was to protect people and sensitive uses, and then provide a structure for future development relative to noise impacts. The ordinance structure fundamentally is what I call a hybrid structure because it has a combination of what you call enumerated acts or prohibited uses, where the act alone is an indication of a violation of a noise ordinance standard, and there's no need for a measurement. And then there are quantitative limits where a measurement would be required to demonstrate compliance or non-compliance with the ordinance. And then there's language in the ordinance that speaks to future development practices and procedures such that impacts are anticipated and mitigated in advance. Yeah, I just shot those 2 points without bringing them up. That was the thing. With the future development, the anticipation is understand what the potential impact is going to be, and then design and mitigate it if necessary. And then a step of verify that the impacts are as predicted. So the draft ordinance structure, as delivered, there's a preamble structure which still has to be developed, section of definitions, a section of applicability, a section that speaks to the quantitative limits, section that then speaks to the enumerated acts, both prohibited and exempted, procedures and policy for obtaining permits for variance from the ordinance, be they short-term or long-term. Sections that speak to how do you determine compliance, how do you take measurements if that is required, and then language that would be integrated as part of, say, a zoning or land use development practice. So I'm going to go through each of those sections. I'm not going to cover every single line of the draft ordinance. So in the following sections of this presentation, I've condensed down the language out of the ordinance. I want to make it clear that this is a paraphrasing and a condensation, and this presentation in no way supersedes the language of the ordinance itself. Preamble, quite frankly, that's something that still has to be developed, because that is your voice coming through. What is it you want this ordinance to accomplish? It does tend to set the stage for any litigation that may arise, because it helps set the expectation for the public and enforcement activities as to what is the definition section. This ordinance is quite a bit more extensive than the 3-clause ordinance you have at the present time. So there is an entire section that lists a number of terms and measures that are relevant to application of a noise ordinance. And this is just a few of them, starting at A and ending up at W. If I recall correctly, the definition section of the ordinance runs already to 2 or 3 pages. So because of the specificity that's required, so there's no ambiguity down the road. The applicability speaks to where does this ordinance apply. It's anticipated that it applies with any property or parcel within Madison County over which the Board of Commission and the enforcement entities have purview. It's anticipated that it would apply to all SNG. SNG, what does it stand for? Significant noise generator. There's a definition of what a significant noise generator is within the definition section. So the ordinance would apply to all SNGs permitted or initiated after the adoption of the ordinance. The language frames any current SNG will become applicable to the ordinance if there is a significant change of use after the adoption date, and various criteria as to what triggers that application, if you will, such as changes in the operation, significant modifications of the equipment, changing the layout, facility expansion, etc. Fundamentally, that's a trigger of any activity on the part of a noise generator that causes a significant increase in sound levels, either in a temporary sense or frequency of events at a regulated receiver. Regulated receiver being the named properties and sensitive uses within the ordinance. What happens if a property changes to a lower permissible level? For example, an industrial parcel rezoned residential. Any new SNG would be subject to the ordinance, but any existing ones would be effectively considered part of the existing sound environment, such that you're not hitting an existing noise generator with lower levels merely because a parcel has changed its zoning class. And fundamentally, all parcels or all noise generators as they currently exist and permitted continue to be regulated as previously. It's a grandfathering clause. Quantitative limits. This is where measurement would come in. It's a permissible impact of 5 dBA during the day and 3 dB at night over what's called the background sound. That would be a long-term average level that would have to be determined prior to the initiation of a noise generator's sources. That's a criteria of just, you go out and determine what the background level is, then you have +5 at daytime, +3 at night. If you don't want to do that background sound level, there's a table that sets limits. There are limits on the levels by time of day and zoning class. There's an interior noise impact limit. There's provisions for temporary allowances, for example, for temporary construction, some sort of activity that can have a finite duration will be given an automatic increment over the level limits, so long as our activity terminates within that time period. No need for a variance. There's a limit on low frequency content because of the impact that low frequencies can have, particularly in terms of penetration into residences. There's a limit on impulsive sounds, how frequently a loud, high-level impact can happen. And then, in addition to low frequency limits, there's a narrowband tone limit defined in different frequency bands. Within these quantitative limits, there's an anticipation that the levels in what's called Table 1 within the ordinance would not be exceeded. So sooner or later, as development keeps coming up, you're going to hit a cap. So the early noise generators have an easy problem. The later noise generators have more challenging problems sitting with a cap. Table 1 is the listing of quantitative limits by hour of day and zoning classification. You'll notice there's an asterisk on agricultural property and rural residential. Because of the size of those parcels, the noise limits would apply within 25 feet of an occupied structure. The levels go up pretty much with population density and intensity of use, and that's just reflective of what you experience in ambient noise environments related to population density and intensity of use. You know, higher the density, just the greater number of humans and the noise generators you have, the greater the ambient sound level is going to be. Now, these levels, let me touch one more thing before going to how we develop those levels. There's also a limit in the ordinance on a low frequency sound penetration into residences. It's called the EDC level, 55 during daytime, 45 at night, and this is to provide some protection during typical sleeping hours of low frequency sounds in bedrooms. It's principally where an issue like that may come up. The language does not specify bedrooms specifically, by the way, it's just interior residences. So, in developing those recommendations, they were informed, or those quantitative noise limits, they were informed by recommended standards or a variety of sources. But one of the things we also did was took measurements at a number of spot locations throughout the county. And we also used a computational means to put together a countywide noise map, accounting for transportation sources, Georgia Renewable Power, poultry barns, because those were from our inventory in a sense of readily identifiable impactors. Those were the significant impactors within the county. The salmon-colored dots are the spots that we took measurements throughout the county. And this is chaos. If I were a professor talking to one of my students, I'd smack him around the head showing a plot like this. And I used to be a professor smacking around my students showing how they did plots like this. The point, what you're seeing here is the distribution of noise measurements at each of the points we sampled. Across the horizontal axis there are the labels, Fox Trail, Keep Pulliam Road, Parsons Road. And yes, we actually even took measurements in the middle of nowhere road. You actually have a road called Middle of Nowhere, and I spotted that, and I had to put a measurement point there, so I could say we took measurements in the middle of nowhere. Typically, the spot measurements span about a 30-minute interval, and for any given sample here, you're seeing is the minimum level that occurred at any time. The green dot's the maximum level that occurred at any time during the spot measurement. And then all the individual dots in between are various acoustic metrics that are used the equivalent average over the entire time period, the level that was exceeded 1% of the time, 10% of the time, 50% of the time. My point of putting up this graphic is not just to say it's chaos, but to bring out that the distribution of sound levels within the county ranges across an incredibly wide range. From mid-20s, which is extremely quiet. That is the sort of quiet you get down in the bottom of the Grand Canyon when there's no aircraft flying overhead, up to over 80, perhaps when the train's going by. And these levels are dramatically varying in time. They're going to vary in level and time throughout the day. When you look at just the distribution of the minimum values range from low 20s to mid 40s. That was the minimum value range. The maximums varied from high 40s to over 80. So there's a significant variation in ambient noise level, background noise level throughout the county. Very much site-specific in a sense, but you can expect this sort of variation to happen throughout the day anywhere you go in the county. Well, what's this distribution of human-generated noise in the county? This is where we use this computational model called sound planning. Common noise sources that impact your everyday lives are dominantly transportation-related vehicles. This is the average 24-hour sound map across the entire county. One of the things we tried to do here, or did do here, is we linked up the colors to levels and what fraction of the county falls within a certain level. So a 24-hour average is a very common measure used to assess land use suitability. And everything in that dark green is under 35, which was a really quiet environment. And in this 24-hour average, for the transportation noise sources, roads and rail, we use public data for those input to the models. Over 55% of the county on a 24-hour average is below 35. That's very quiet. Then we've got this broken out, and you should have it in the material now in front of you for each of these sound levels. Typically when you're getting up above about 55, you start getting concerned about local impact, and over 60, yeah, but that's between those two sound levels for the transportation sources, that's only 3% of the county's area. And for those who know the county layout, you can see that your hotspots are along your arterials and along the rail line. One of the things we can also do is use the DOT data to do a peak hour calculation. So that would be your maximum noise due to transportation when you're getting the most vehicles per unit time going past the sources. And this is your middle of the night, shall we say late in the night, minimum hour, when your traffic has really dropped down to the lowest possible levels, and then over 70% of the counties below 35. Very much indicating that you have large areas of the county that are not impacted by transportation. Then you throw in all your poultry barns and GRP. Even though we're using red for hotspot, it doesn't indicate that the levels there are in any way unhealthy or unacceptable. It's just the color scaling we're using there. This particular mapping, it shows that poultry barns are a significant noise generator. They're pretty much everywhere. This is a worst case scenario. If every single barn that we identified through aerial imagery is operating simultaneously, which probably doesn't happen throughout the year. The bright greenish level is still 40 dB, and that's quite acceptable from typically considered quite acceptable for a environmental noise measure. So even when we have the poultry and operations and GRP, a lot of the county is at relatively low levels. You throw everything in together, so this is all the industry that we modeled and the transportation, 24-hour average. There is more of an impact there, but when you see where, for example, where the poultry barns are impacting, they're outside the areas of the transportation area that's being impacted, which is what you'd expect in a rural noise source. So the levels that we recommended were informed by the spot measurements, by this noise map, by the standards that indicate preservation of, I don't want to use the term rural quiet, but rural quiet is an important factor. That's why you actually see the levels are set lower rural as compared to more higher density uses. All right. Section 4, with the quantitative limits, to enforce the limits there would require the use of a sound level meter and trained individuals. From an enforcement perspective, there are other acts called enumerated acts, which by their nature alone are listed or considered to be offensive to the public welfare and are would not require use of a sound level meter to demonstrate a violation of the ordinance. One thing I want to bring out in this list of the prohibited acts is item 11, which speaks to schools and courts, churches. Those aren't prohibited acts. They're listed in there as a specific protected receiver, such that noises that are impacting schools, courts, churches, and hospitals in a negative way could be identified as non-compliant and cited immediately. All right. Within exemptions, typical exemptions for public-owned vehicles, road repairs, utility construction, emergency signaling devices. There are some limits, if I recall correctly, on non-emergency signaling devices, burglar alarms, with time limits associated with them so they don't become a nuisance if operated excessively. One of the challenges in any enumerated acts section is finding what you want to control and what you want to exempt. One of the things I strongly encourage in terms of comment and consideration of the ordinance is to game it. I call it gaming. How might the ordinance as written yield unintended consequences? How might it be used in a way that you do not want it to be used? So please consider that as you're reviewing the ordinance. Okay. So, for example, in exempted uses, outdoor school and playground activities, there's an explicitly cited exempted use. You can imagine how if we didn't have that, it could be used against them, shall we say. There's a section of the ordinance that enables an applicant to apply for a permit for variance. There's a specific process that an applicant would have to follow. They have to include professional analysis of their impact in that permit process, and it requires a third-party review. With that third-party review at the applicant's cost. That third-party review would be advisory back to the appropriate body. Compliance section just speaks to how you enforce the ordinance. Citation would be immediate for an enumerated act. If it's based on measurement, the measurement has to be able to demonstrate that the cited use is the actual cause of the violation. Just because you can hear something doesn't mean it would violate the level requirements. You you've got to be able to demonstrate that the source that you're citing is actually the contributing source at the threshold of quantitative interest. Within the compliance section, then, speaking of that, there are measurement criteria provisions as to at what threshold is it a violation. And there's a provision in there that still needs to be refined based on the final version of the ordinance that speaks to how a measurement would account for variances that have been granted or special use permit that have been granted. And then various actions that are complaint triggered, obligations on the noise generator to pursue verification activities if a complaint is received. Section 8, TBD, measurement procedures. It's TBD because it all depends upon how the final version of the ordinance reads as to how you perform a measurement to demonstrate compliance, demonstrate that the source of interest is actually the impacting source. We anticipate that there'll be a guidance document available, it's within the scope, that informs applicants, interested parties, how to perform measurements within the context of the ordinance and within the context of best practices. Last section of the overall ordinance is language that speaks to future planning and development. It requires a proposed significant noise generator to develop and submit a noise management plan. That noise management plan would then be reviewed at the applicant's cost by third party, with then that third party review again being advisory back to the Board of Commission or responsible authority. Within the planning here is in this section is a requirement for the applicant to verify compliance post-startup. So it's tell us what you're going to do, mitigate if necessary, and prove it. Prove it actually has the levels that you're predicting with the time of variation that you're predicting. And as with the measurement procedures, we anticipate there'll be a separate guidance document that speaks to what applicants need to do to develop a good noise management plan. What should the content of that noise management plan be? How should it address the ordinance, etc. The language also anticipates the use of special use permits, such that the Board of Commissioners could approve variances or particular noise-related conditions on a given approval for lands. My understanding of the process going forward is we're looking for stakeholder input, inevitable revisions, and then once the documents or the ordinance is in its final form and adopted, generation of guidance documents, and such other actions as we may anticipate based on the form of the adopted ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Ken. For the public's knowledge, this will also be on the website tomorrow. We're going to have 30 days of public input, and we will vote to adopt an ordinance. Our threshold is 45 days, give or take. Don't know the exact meeting date yet, but to that discretion of 45 days, give or take 1 or 2, depending on how the meeting falls. Feel free to submit any comments. Make sure you name it so we know where it's coming from, make sure it's not to repeat. Question, Ken, for you, Kenneth. You know, I'm sitting here thinking about this and knowing that we're, you know, in 45 days we'll have a vote, we hope. To be able to follow up from the county's perspective, how far out of scope are we to be able to, do we have businesses that are pushing the boundary that we're going to have to go out and purchase, what is it, $30-something thousand worth of equipment to monitor? because I was counting the bullet points, you know, there's some interested parties in the room on one particular place, and it looks like they're coming in about 10 lower than the other 9. But on that same threshold of where they're at, how close are they for us to say, okay, what is it gonna take to cross that threshold, and I've got to go out and buy a bunch of equipment to monitor this? And or is it gonna go out of date and the equipment change before we ever get to that point? Are we at a crucial point of monitoring?
No.
Based on that scale?
No. Based on that, based on what you're seeing, those uses would be already permitted, and that is the existing noise environment. I would anticipate that measurements are going to be used more for future uses, or for, and this is what one of these you need to consider is, are there current uses that you would want to eliminate the grandfathering clause? Right now, with the language of the ordinance, the quantitative limits, the current environment's completely grandfathered in.
Yeah, I understand that part. I just want to make sure that we don't have a certain area, and we'll pick on poultry. Make sure they're not pushing the boundaries of, we need to start looking at the noise level that these poultry houses are bringing. Do we need to go out and purchase equipment for it? Are we far below that threshold?
Well, speaking of poultry farms and houses, no, and agricultural uses are explicitly exempted. I don't think we saw any significant areas due to poultry barns that would give me any pause of suitable, healthy land use there.
And I understand that Highway 72 being the new 4-lane. I understand that Highway 98 with the new Port of Savannah being in Gainesville, that our truck traffic's going to increase, which obviously is going to increase the noise. Based off of the calculations in the ordinance or the study presented so far, that deemed to be the highest locations of noise. I don't think we're at I-85 level yet of putting boundary walls up for subdivisions, but it could be in 20 years. And I ask all this, Ken, knowing that when we, as a board, and the public comment comes back, that we need to stay in the range that we're supposed to be in. We don't need to just be throwing darts at the wall.
So, based on your comprehensive land use planning and traffic projections on your major roads, you can anticipate that the impact is going to spread out from those roads, clearly as traffic increases. If I recall correctly, looking at this, there's a rail line that's running up along here, and that's going to be a constant impactor as well. Light industrial, commercial tends to have a localized impact, but so long as going forward they do a noise management plan and are aware that they need to manage their noise impact, it should not significantly increase their footprint or significantly increase exposed populations. One of the things I strongly encourage in your zoning and planning is to very carefully consider adjacencies. Heavy industry next to residential is rarely a good situation. Light industry and commercial next to residential is better. Think about gradation, which is what you do with your zoning now, gradation of intensity of use from heavy noise generating uses, buffered by lesser uses, then get to your residents. And even so, you still look to how can you protect the residential areas. and such other sensitive uses that you choose to. GRP is a bit of a hotspot. If I recall correctly, that's the spot right here.
One of the things that I was impressed with seeing that was the Dogborough area on 29 because of the volume of cars and the businesses around the Ingles area. It was one of the maps, it was lit up.
Yep.
And that area is going to continue to grow with houses,
Yeah.
believe it or not. And we hope it's business, but it'll be commercial. But I think it was very well presented and very well documented.
I have a question about your baseline use, and, so we used the current background level to establish a baseline level. In your mind, as the county changes, is that a moving number? And then the limits that you set, are they based on based on the area, what's going on there? Are they percentages above or below what that baseline background level is?
The background sound level is what exists at a particular spot. Once it's been established for a given noise generator.
So what you're saying is site specific?
It'll be site specific. It'll be part of the noise management plan, part of the permit. Next person or next noise generator that comes in that impacts that same receiver, well, they're gonna get another increment. But they can't exceed these limits without getting a variance. That's why I said there's a cap on that. Because otherwise you could continually raise the level with no end. And you could take an area that's otherwise residential, and by having multiple separately permitted noise generators coming around them, end up with an untenable noise environment. That's why I said the early generators have it easiest. The later generators are coming up against a noise cap. And if they want to go over that, they have to seek your approval to do so.
Like the devil's advocate on this thing, we've got the GRP plant down there that occupies a quarter of the space of the property. And there's a large building there that it has been suggested to be used for another industrial application. That, if I understood what you just said, if we grandfather GRP in where they're at, then it would prohibit additional development on that site of noise generation. Would that be safe to say?
No, sir, it wouldn't prohibit, but they would have to request a variance. Now, given that the limits that in immediate proximity of GRP are probably over some of these, over the tables right now. So the current levels there would become the background level that that operator would be subject to. So it doesn't prohibit outright any further increase in the level. It does require them to know that background level, plan accordingly, and seek a variance from you.
But they couldn't do anything to exceed what the existing level is.
You could, depending on how you frame that section of the ordinance, permit them to go up. Yeah. And actually, concentration of industry is not a bad practice.
But if another facility or expansion or whatnot came in, the existing footprint of that noise impact today, if it grows an inch outside that, then they have to make a plan to mitigate. So while they may want to get outside that, those levels, is posted for any new work,
Yeah.
and they may, because some of it may coalesce together, they may have to actually mitigate some of the existing to make sure that footprint or that boundary is not expanded.
Right. And if GRP ever does anything that changes their footprint, that would trigger the loss of the grandfather status, and then they'd have to do the noise mitigations at that time.
So if they were to add another generator, then it would,
So the entire facility now would have to comply, not just the added generator.
not just the added generator.
Correct.
You know, it'd be appropriate for, I'm thinking about the timeline. Of course, we committed, and I'm not saying we don't, we want public input. I've said that since from the beginning, but if we give 30, 40 days on that, coalesce those comments, we probably need to get back to y'all for any, relative discussion points. And I think any recommended draft changes, of course, we want staff and legal to look at them. I'm trying to get to the point that we might not be ready in 45 days. It may,
Yeah.
I don't want to do it right, that's what I'm trying to say. So I don't want to postpone getting public comment. I just don't want to set unrealized expectations when somebody comes back to the job and vote on it.
I think you also need to very carefully consider the enforcement mechanism and what investments and training would be required.
Yeah, that's definitely a hurdle that won't happen in 45 days. No way. Going back with that, and I think Derek is dead on this. Our comprehensive plan, which you already have the limits, we already understand those, but we need to consider in our writing of this ordinance what that comprehensive plan is going to look like, and we're not even going to have that until final of May.
And one of the things we can do, if you wish, is if you have advanced knowledge of particular changes or industries coming in, we can roll them into the noise map. So you can get at least some indication of what potential footprint could be, the consequence of that.
Just one last thing for me, anyway. You've done a lot of counties. And just from the hip, do we look out of the normal from most counties? I mean, I would think we were below normal compared to like a Franklin County. If you ride through Franklin County, it mirrors Madison County right up until it don't, because of I-85. How would you say that scale that you've looked at in your bullet points would fare out against counties surrounding us? Now, I know we have peak places, don't get me wrong.
This is a quiet county. There were places that were quieter than an anechoic chamber. Right? Anechoic chamber is a specialty test environment. And a lot of this county is very rural. So I hope I'm answering the question there. One of the challenges then within a rural county is as the demographics change and people move into a quiet county seeking rural quiet, as development comes in and traffic increases, that environment that perhaps grew them there starts to change over time. The ordinance as framed relative to the size of the county and the impact you have right now is comprehensive and more detailed than some other counties of larger scope. But it's the difference in the boards of commissioners as to how they wanted to manage development. Whether the quantitative limits came in strictly through special use permits or embodied within the main part of the ordinance itself. What you have here is the quantitative limits appearing both with the main body of the ordinance and then referred to out of the planning language. There are other counties that strictly go with enumerated acts within the noise ordinance and then quantitative limits only through special use permits.
Any other questions, gentlemen?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Since this is regulating based upon zoning classification, will enactment not have to comply with ZPL? Hear public hearings and whatnot, for zoning procedures law?
Sorry, you lost me there. Please repeat.
Since this proposed ordinance is regulating based upon, in part, zoning classifications. Won't enactments have to go through zoning procedures law, we require public hearings?
I do not have an answer for that question. I've never heard that question before. I'm ignorant of the implications.
Okay.
And, the guys of the Georgia Association of Zoning Administrators, it was put to the question in 2020, discussed and sought after in 2021, and passed through the EPL at the first of this year.
Okay.
Dennis, anything else? Oh, Christina.
I had a question. When you look at your quantitative limits and then your enumerated acts, so your quantitative, that's a machine that obviously reads off of a number. And so your enumerated acts, when you talk about what's prohibited, exempt, and exemptions, is that going to be more detailed in your measurement procedures that guideline of procedures hasn't been shared yet? So will that be something that'll be detailed for like our road deputies instead of putting a measuring machine in every vehicle? Like you've got horns and signal devices under enumerated acts, and let's just say across the road some 22-year-old kids have got an air horn or a truck horn, and they blow it twice every weekend for 3 or 4 weeks in a row. And so is there something like that, some kind of guideline our dispatch and road deputies can have to know when they've reached that meeting? Because it's like there's a lot of discretion, so all yelling and shouting can't be violating a noise ordinance.
Typically, it's when the yelling and shouting or the horns are perceived to be injurious to the public welfare.
Right, so will we have some kind of guide on how we can't not measure it with a machine, but is it so many complaints, is it within so many times, within so many weeks, at a certain time of day?
To an extent, that is your local culture to develop over time.
Isn't that the sort of thing such as injurious to the public welfare? Aren't those the sorts of standards that have been held unconstitutional by the Georgia Supreme Court?
It comes down to selective enforcement. So the question is very well placed. These sorts of enumerated acts have been found to be constitutional and enforceable, subject to that being content neutral, as objective and non-subjective, as uniform as possible.
I asked that because I talked to law enforcement in our county, and their concern is kind of like when Derek had our original meeting, and you have your high residential areas, and then someone's complaining about somebody's stall or somebody's garage door opener, these minor things that me personally, don't want the county to adopt a noise ordinance, and now we're running our deputies to death because we have a noise ordinance that says something about a horn. I know that we've started this process for industrial purposes, so should we separate those out more of industry, business, commercial, and more residential? Are we putting machines in every deputy's car, like more definitive?
So there has to be a definition of time, and obviously you did that in your baseline establishment. There's nothing louder in this county than the train. But the train goes through, it makes noise when it's moving. One thing that might come close would be when Williams pump station, when they blow out their exhaust. And it only occurs once every periodically, but that's pretty loud when that occurs. So there's got to be there needs to be some sort of definition of this is a duration of time, a percentage of time, or something
within the detailed language of the ordinance. As I said, this is a paraphrasing. Mm-hmm. There are, if I recall correctly, on horns and signal devices, additional qualifying language as to what constitutes that act being actionable.
think Christina's right, though. We saw recently on the news, suburbs around Atlanta, garage door openers being one of them. Restrictions, leaf blowers, landscaping companies.
Right.
Because of, I work at night, I'm a nurse, I'm all there all night, but they're blowing weed eaters all day long, or, sorry, leaf blowers all day long, I can't sleep. We take this and we turn it into this, and you gotta be able to enforce that. So we'll get to that.
And going back to Christina's question, I'm looking at warrants and signals devices, it says, and as to time, it says for any unreasonable period of time.
Yeah, so you decide reasonable.
Well, again, those are the ways that, in my experience, noise ordinances have been declared unconstitutional. Maybe there's something that says unreasonable is a constitutional measure. I'm not aware of it, if there is.
The avenue around that, and we're looking to the law on that, would be to include further qualification as to nature of the horn, frequency of sounding, duration of sounding, whether it's for an emergency or non-emergency purpose.
As much as I understand the importance of this, particularly some of the folks here in the audience, the thing that scares me about this is if we don't do this right, this becomes a tool for one neighbor to beat the next door neighbor over the head when they can't get on.
Yeah, Mr. Chandler, that's a perfect phrase. That's, I use the term weaponization of an ordinance.
Can happen.
Can happen. So in your review, in the public comments, look at how this could have unintended consequences.
Yeah, we can go right back to the trucking industry, which we saw recently. The guy that's got 5 semi trucks and cranks them up at 4 in the morning, lets them idle because he's leaving at 5. He's letting the truck warm up. Got the 5 of them running. The guy next door can't sleep. They hate each other. Now we're the bad guys because we voted for the law. And half the room was divided. So,
Yeah.
all right.
Outline definition.
We're not doing public comment tonight on this one because that's why we're gonna give everybody time to review it and then write the public comment, and then we'll take the public comment from him and everybody else at one time and go through it, because if not, we'll be asking a million questions.
Good presentation, Dave.
Yes, thank you.
It's a good presentation.
Thank you.
And it may, I won't state, I agree with Derek, it may not be 45 days. It may end up being a lot longer than that, depending on how much public comment comes in, but it will be on the
I
website.
think that we talked about possibly the end of January, depending on the public, I thought maybe it was a Christopher, the end of January, depending on the amount of changes that we want to, that's when we would do our public hearing. But it could be the end of January, 1st of February, public hearing, and that adopted later.
Is this about zoning?
No. I have a question, clarification on the input from the public. Is that gonna be a public hearing, or do you have to
I'm gonna show you.
write,
Hang on one second.
comment?
I'll show you right here.
or do we have to write to you, or who? Is there gonna be a public hearing, or
I think it's online.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up.
You can go on and type out your
Yeah, you can go
comments
to the-
line by line if you want.
Yep, you can go to the county website, it's a large red banner across the top. You can click there, you can put your comment, and I think it requires an email address, so we can revert back. And then obviously we'll announce when the public hearing will be, but that could be subject to change depending on how long it takes staff and RKGO to get those finals.
okay, but there will be a public hearing at some point?
Yes,
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
I have one thing. I have a health consultation coming from the Georgia Department of Health, who was told to write this health consultation for our county by the Agency of Toxic Substance and Disease Registry. I sent the board an email about this and never received an answer. I would like for the board to use that in consideration to blend in with the noise ordinance. This is a matter of public health. And the state of Georgia Department of Public Health is writing something specific
That's
to
exactly
the
why I
area
put that
around
comment.
GRP. And I would like to know who is supposed to receive that information when I get it.
I would put everything on the website. Let it all be public knowledge for everybody to chime into, and that way, when we consolidate this.
They're writing it right now.
Good. Put it on, copy it up, upload it to it, because we want it all. I mean, the key to this, think about it, we spent a long time doing this. We don't have to rush. Yes, people want it in place now, but in order to do it right, we may be talking about this 6 months from now. Because we want that input, we want to do it right, but yet we don't want to demonize our neighbor neither. So, all right, let's go forward. Public hearing and actions of zoning matters.
This is what the link will look like on the
There you
website. It's a red link, you'll click there. And then this is where tomorrow I'll upload the actual draft, and then I'll upload his presentation, his PowerPoint that he presented today. And then you go down to here, see it requires an email address, but you don't have to put your name. We ask to put your physical address just to be sure it's Madison County citizens, and then you can do a paragraph of your thoughts and opinions, comments and stuff. And all those will be emailed to me and the deputy clerk. We'll be the ones that see those and review them and consolidate them.
All right, Mr. Scott.
Good afternoon.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you.
All of our zoning matters tonight actually end up in one district, I believe, District 1. So we would like to present them all and just say, okay, here they are. There was no public comment during our public hearing as for or against. But because of our rules of a second public hearing, we must go through them one by one. So we'll try to make it very brief, as brief as we can. The first one is Wesley Bridges, and there's two parts to it, but this was taken in one vote. Wesley Bridges requested to rezone his 2.75 acre property from A1 to AR to bring non-conforming property into compliance. The zoning regulation by combining it with his 1.5 acre adjoining property. The second one is he's requesting his 1.5 acre from A1 to AR to bring the non-conforming property into compliance with zoning regulations by combining it with the 2.75 acre adjoining property for a total of 4.25 acres. The property is located at 477 McGee Patrick Road in Danielsville on map 11, parcel 95A in District 1. And as I said, this was taken in one vote, and no one spoke against it. The planning is only recommends approval.
All right, is anybody here to speak in favor of? Anybody here to speak in opposition of? Hearing none, we'll close the floor, bring it back before the board. Gentlemen, I'll entertain a motion for item number 1.
1 and 2.
Okay, 1 and 2 together, I'm sorry.
Make the motion to speak through.
I have a motion.
1 and 2 be approved.
All right, I have a motion by Commissioner Adams for approval on items 1 and 2. I have a second by Commissioner Chandler, items 1 and 2. Any discussion, gentlemen?
Quick question. The motion is what the motion was made for P&Z?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, to approve the P&Z finding.
Mr. Chairman, we may want to just clarify for the audience if there's anybody here who wants to speak on either 1 or 2.
Oh, yeah.
I think we did the public hearing, you just had 1.
Anyone here to speak in favor of and or in opposition of items 1 and 2 on tonight's agenda for zoning matters? Hearing none, I have a motion by Commissioner Adams, second by Commissioner Chandler. Any discussion, gentlemen? Hearing none, Frank?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I'm sorry. Mr. Bridges, you are complete. You're done. Item number 3, sir.
Item number 3, Mark Whitfield is requested to rezone 2 acre portion of his 5 acre tract from A2 to AR to cut off to sell with existing home. The remaining 3 acres of which now is adjoining A2 property for a total of 14.78 acres where he plans to build a home. This will also bring the property into compliance with zoning regulations. The property is located at 1399 East Commerce Road on map 12, parcel 167, District 1. The planning and zoning voted to approve.
My notes, Mr. Chairman, say approve with the condition that the 3 acres be combined with the adjoining parcel. Maybe I wrote that down wrong. Is that right?
That was correct.
It was
Yes,
That
it is.
was correct.
Okay, without addition to what you just said. All right.
Mr. Mark Whitfield, here, Whitfield? All right, no worries. Anybody here to speak in favor of this rezone? Anybody here to speak in opposition of? Hearing none, we'll close the floor, bring it back before the board. Gentlemen.
Make a motion to approve, so, as conditioned.
Yes.
Second. I have a motion by Commissioner Adams to approve with conditions, second by Commissioner Chandler with conditions. Any discussion, gentlemen? Hearing none, Derek?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, number 4.
We'll do these together also.
No,
Now, there's
no.
a little bit.
Mr. Everhart, attorney for Robert Armour, is requested to rezone his 17.97 acre property from A1 to RA2 to allow the property to be split into, to allow the property to be split into 2 tracts, one containing 15 acres and the other 2.97 acres. This property is located on Leon Ellis Road on map 16, parcel 64, District 1. The planning and zoning voted approval with a 4-to-1 vote. 4 for and against, so it was, approved by the planning and zoning recommendation.
All right, again, Mr. Chair, there was a condition on this one. I think, it would be approved, for rezone from A1 to AR with a condition of no more than 2 splits, meaning it couldn't be divided into more than 3 properties total. If I understand it correctly, Christopher Tracy. That's correct.
Yes, and there was also an update on the acreage. It went from 15 to 15.63 once the plat, the pre-approval plat went through.
15.6.
6.3.
And the
The
smaller,
new survey showed it, but it's not been approved, of course. Site plan.
If it's 15.63, then it won't be 2.97.
no, it'd be 2.34.
That's correct.
That's correct, yeah.
All right, is anybody here to speak in favor of, sir?
Good evening, Eric Everhart. I'm here on behalf of both Robert Armour as well as Gary Armour because this relates to both of them. Essentially, this is a division of family property. What I would say to you is that we come here tonight to ask you to approve the rezone to AR without the conditions on it. All of this stems from an effort to try to maintain as much CUBA exemption as possible because there are going to be some activities that end up taking portions out and we're going to put portions back in. That's where that refigure came from. And I'm talking about number 4, but number 5 needs to be involved a little bit just from an understanding standpoint. Number 4 is the split to 15 and 15.63 and then 2.34. In order to be able to do what these brothers are looking to do with what I call the southern portion of it, which is keep it in conservation, needed 10 acres that was going to be split off, so that's, and trying to get a symmetrical line all came into play here in this plan that they have. Mr. Gary Armour is purchasing this from his brother. The intention is to keep it in the family. Everything around this tract is Armour property. There's every boundary touches another piece of Armour property. Gary is asking you ultimately through his brother to allow him to have freedom down the road if he desires to do so, to split it up for other family members more so than just one more time. Because this action tonight is going to result in one split, Gary would only be allowed one more if you add that condition. We're asking to remove it and just send it straight to AR, particularly given that he surrounds it. It takes it also out of a poultry issue, which we know that's a hot topic everywhere. No longer would that be permitted, but Gary gets a little bit more control. He is going to put it back in conservation. So we're breaching, and it goes back in. It's 10 years before things can happen again under those circumstances. That's all the factors that we ask you to consider. If you have any particular questions, I'm happy to answer them. I can get into a lot more detail about how the splits are going, but I don't want to waste your time if you don't need to hear it from me.
The 10 years is not set in stone. You can opt out of CUBA at any point in time. You just have to pay.
Well, you pay it free.
Yes, but yeah, you could do it in 1 year.
Exactly.
Just so we're clear. What was the reasoning behind the condition, P&Z?
Commissioner, you can explain that better.
Well, they are just that AR zoning for such a large tract of land. You know, currently we're just doing the AR to 3.99 max. So, that's why the commission voted to do that condition on there.
It could be split up
Yes.
into 2 acre parcels from that, making 7 parcels out of the 15 point.
And that part of the moratorium's not open.
Yeah, not on the moratorium.
And that's not happening. I mean, we're not asking to do
Well,
that.
I understand, but,
today.
yeah,
Yeah, so, I mean,
I guess.
I had to catch up to your question.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of.
That's right. The only part of the moratorium that's open is a single split that's under the 3.99 acres, which that 2.34 is.
Correct. So the moratorium would still apply.
Yeah. I'm trying to, just for everybody's purpose, trying to wrap my head around the fact of the condition and what it may lead to the day after the moratorium's lifted. And I think that's where y'all are going with this.
Yes, sir, if you included, putting an R1 in there, it'd be 8 parcels with 1.5 acres R1, and then the rest of them being ARs, and you could work the R1 in because of so many ARs. What they're needing is the singles.
Yeah.
Sorry. What they're needing is the single split for the brothers' property is what brought it about, right, the 2 acres.
That's correct. That's
And
right.
change over here.
That's correct.
And then this remaining parcel, instead of it remaining an A1, it could become a conforming A2, but what they're asking for is for this outlined blue parcel to become an AR for possible splits. So the board was split on that matter, and the only way it passed was limiting the amount of splits possible on that property. And then I talked to Mike, because I wasn't sure during the moratorium if we were allowed to skip a level coming into conformity, if it's a non-conforming A1, if it has to go to A2, or if it can be an AR, or anything it wanted to be. I wasn't sure, and I wanted to make sure that we were clear on that as it comes into conformity.
Okay. And I don't think Chris meant anything by this, but it wasn't the only way it passed. It's just the option that was presented.
I got you.
It's an option presented in the past.
Correct.
Yeah.
But all of this is Gary.
Yeah.
All around that.
Well, I know Mr. Armour's not in the development business. He's got a fine business, a lot of farmland there. I guess the reason I'm asking about that condition more than anything is because we have developers that are trying to find that loophole. And tomorrow we can get one that comes in with an A1 and don't want conditions, and the next thing you know, I got a subdivision that just happened to split because it fell under the loophole of the moratorium. I don't get a
Once the
vote.
moratorium's listed.
Yeah, that's right.
This one's here because it's, now that we've increased the acreage requirement for A1, this entire tract is non-conforming. So this proposal brings the entire tract into conformity. I think the question of the condition is looking to once the moratorium is no longer in place.
Correct. Fine. Anybody have any other questions for Mr. Everhart?
Thank you.
Anyone here else to speak in favor of?
Yes, Gary Armour, 6314 East Commerce Road. Like I say, I've shared my heart and soul. Worked this land with my father many years. Planted 300 acres with a John Deere B tractor on Thanksgiving Day when it snowed. Never asked a dime. You know, Dad called me, for example, if my house is here and the road, property across the road, 71 acres, which, you know, you're cleared my land, Lily goes here, and then we'll come here, we'll wrap around it. So my brother, Lily, will have 17 acres or 18 acres there. So at the end of the day, I have no intention of breaking up, busting up, or doing anything. I love the land as much as I do anything. And my father put it to me best on the 71 acres across the road. He says, son, he says, I'm here, and I'm going to see Crawford Jenkins. And I said, for what? And he says, because we're buying it. I says, I don't want to have to buy anything else. And he said to me, he said, son, I don't want no DAMN chicken houses across from my farm, and I know you don't want them across from your house. And I'm not against chickens. We all got to eat chickens, and I work for the poultry plants. It's not about that. This is some of the prettiest, my father would say, some of the prettiest land in the county, okay? And I want to keep it that way. And you talking about something that dropped in my gut and kicked me when my brother first said this, knowing, thank God, I even shared with Derek this afternoon, is the president was set when my sister and I, who were the executors, who worked on the farm, never took a dime, during the estate planning, which Pat Graham started and Eric helped us finish, was that any of the three of us, two siblings, one in California, one in Texas, were out of the picture. Thank God Dad had stocks, but we put it in place to where any of us sold any or all, we had to go offer to the other remaining siblings. Thank God we did. Because, again, this is not against my brother. You know, this is recorded. I'm not against my brother. If he wants another change of life, wants to move in another direction, and he wants to be able to live his life, so be it. Okay? God bless him. But personally, I've got a connection to this property just like my father did. And, you know, people want to hunt all the time, but I don't let people hunt because I worry about somebody falling out of a tree and getting hurt. But as the days go on, I see deer in my yard, but I'm like my dad. I've gotten to where now I walk out in the fields and I love to see things grow. And I'm proud to say that when this was dropped in my lap, I said, oh, what am I going to do? But I ponied up when I had already bought the equipment a month before he had called me. So it's disheartening that he wanted out, but he's out. But so long story short, I'm proud to say I got my wheat in the ground before Thanksgiving, especially with all this rain, because I can imagine being out there with something that you can't get in the field. I love the land. And again, I don't have any major person in my life. I don't have any kids, but if I were to remarry and my subject new person that loved me like nobody's business had a child or a daughter or a son, it sure would be nice to be able to say, hey, why don't we give you 5 acres or split this in half for 7 acres or whatever. I just don't want to be limited, but I have no intentions of doing anything.
All right, thank you.
And thank you.
Appreciate it, bud. Anybody here to speak? Anyone else in favor of? Hearing none, anyone speak in opposition of? Hearing none, we'll close the floor, bring it back before the board. Gentlemen, will entertain a motion.
Here is the stipulation that anything sold has to be off to the family member that stayed with that property, even the recent change of ownership.
Might be. I hope it is. I don't know how Eric worded it.
You know what, as soon as he said it again, I started thinking about that. I don't know that I can give you that answer. I think, I don't think we limited it to one sale. I think it was at any point if anybody owned it. But I don't want to mislead you that's, I know that to be absolute.
Terry, I would hope to say that my brother was given 2.7 acres to where he and his wife built their home, I don't think that that would fall in the realm of the estate. But the rest of the land that he inherited, which is a little 1.23 to the left of his house, this land and the 10.01, if this happens, would be subject to the same division.
Did y'all approach P&C about changing your request from what it originally was?
During the planning and zoning meeting?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Adams, in relation to what?
Not at the meeting, he changed it prior to the meeting where at first there was a scribble where it said A2, and it was scribbled out to AR.
So where did the request that we not amended it, where it won't be split again? When did that come up?
That was at the board meeting, P&Z board.
So the P and Z board initiated the condition.
Yes.
That's
Gotcha.
correct.
Gotcha.
There was, from my memory, there was some discussion about various things. And one of the issues I would agree with planning was going straight from A1 to AR, and that's sort of generated conversations about, you know, we did a limited split on this other one, and it started that conversation.
And then if I may, somebody said, well, how it might affect the neighboring properties. But open discussion was closed at that time, so I couldn't come back and say, can I point out that I am the neighbor?
Right, and I agree with that.
All right. Mike? Yes. That's all right, gentlemen. Is there anything we need to be cautioned on?
No, sir, I think that's all been laid out as fully as I could.
All right. I know it's back before the board, but I've got to ask this. I mean, Gary, obviously they're struggling because of the condition that you're requesting be removed. I don't think there's a problem at all with the actual rezone, it's the condition. Is this going to jeopardize anything if you don't get the condition?
It's not gonna jeopardize the sale or et cetera, but, you know, I just put it this way. Based on where you see my house, everybody clear on where my house lies in that picture? If not, if I may, I'll point it out. I don't really know, but my house is right here, and then the cross, if you've seen it, is in the field here. Let's say I meet somebody and they've got 2 kids, they got 3 kids, and like I say, if somebody wants to take care of me like a king, then I'm gonna certainly take care of her queen and her pawns or her children. But if you want to put 3 5-acre lots here and have a strip of woods here to protect me to where, you know, I've got right intentions from my heart and doing anything but what's right. I want to keep, I'm just asking y'all to help me keep things agricultural. I have absolutely no wrong intent on doing anything. I just don't want to worry about having asterisks and what can I do.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I believe you 100%.
Yeah.
The problem is when the board makes a motion to approve it, they open the door for the next guy. There'll be a guy in here next month.
Right.
That you would set the precedence. And sure, they said, you know what, we done it for him, we won't have any choice. So but only because, the only reason I asked that question is because nobody's jumping to make a motion.
Yeah.
Because they're scared of that condition, of the precedence that will come.
And the only reason, to make sure, the only reason, if, there's, I guess that little strip where he wanted, the only reason I said we'll go from, and I told Tracy, the only, if I left it, if I went A1 to A2, or excuse me, with his part AR, and mine, this went from A1 to A2, technically you can't split it. It's A2. You can't split it in, because there's only 15 acres. You can't, you gotta have 20 acres to split half. So that's when I started thinking, well, if I do that, why not just go AR? You know, so.
Mr. Shannon, if I could answer your question, I went back and looked, fortunately, I brought more than I ever really needed, but I went back and looked at the agreement. It's a lifetime of the longest family member owning any of these tracts. So
We could only be sold to them. We'll have to be
Well,
offered to.
offered to a family member before something else happens from that standpoint. And Mr. Higdon, just to answer your question, certainly understand not wanting to open a can of worms going down the road. I think it's gonna be a unique situation to have somebody come in that owns everything around it.
I get it, yeah.
That certainly would be an explanation.
And I promise you, Gary, I'm not putting you through the ringer just because we're friends.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we normally don't do that. For
Just
a
like
friend, I am putting you through it in a way, just for the fact that we are trying to protect the future on it. And it's not, you just happen to be the guy today.
Yeah, well, I've been the whipping post more than
Mike, is there any reason that, if it goes to AR with conditions that they cannot, that would prevent them to come back at some point and ask for a variance on that condition, say 5 years later, that
Oh, no, I mean, the condition's part of the zoning, and you can rezone it anytime. Apply to rezone it at any time. I guess one other thing I would say is that it doesn't necessarily have to be just a yes, no on the condition that P and Z recommended. If this board wanted to impose a condition of no more than 3 splits or 4 splits, or put a minimum acreage on the number, on any split, you know, any of that would be on the table.
it gives some options.
if I pipe in, well, go ahead, Dennis.
Did y'all agree to the condition when
No.
presented? You know?
We didn't have an opportunity.
No, if we were still asking for the straight, zoning adjustment to AR.
And I think the person that posed the questions and brought it up, maybe, and I can't remember, to limit number of splits was also the person that was not aware that I owned all the land around it.
Well, and we're friends too, and I'm devil's advocate, owning all the land around it, except for that public way, where one of the issues we have in Madison County right now is, in order to avoid creating a subdivision, they simply cut driveways down a public way. And, I mean, I appreciate y'all's intent and all like that, but I'd much rather sit here, or another person sit here somewhere down the road and say, you approach them and say, love my wife with her 2 kids, wants to build a house here.
Right.
We want to rezone it for that, because at the end of the day, that maintains the property together, in my mind, which is what some of our goal has been in what's been presented to us in the past. I guess.
Well, let's keep it back here on the board side.
But if somebody posed a question, I mean, technically you can say it no less than 5 acres.
We would still need the 2.34 acre split, but.
Yeah, that's most definitely.
But beyond that, would not oppose a condition to any subsequent split being not less than 5 acres.
It's wooded lot out, all of it, but I'll just say, after he's actually had to get 10.1, he only wanted 8.83, but I had to give 10.01 to be able to do a continuation of Cuba on this side. And then I'm giving him a strip of land by mine as an easement until my Cuba ends, and then it transfers over to him. But you take what's left to be a little over 36 acres. If I were gonna do anything because I had to, nobody knows the future, if somebody had a health issue, et cetera. I know how Dad loved the farm, Dad loved the land, which on the side note, my brother got upset because I left the combine. It got rained on one time, and I said, no, Dad, Bob says Dad would be upset over the combine. He'd be flipping in his grave if you were selling it. He had a combine So it had land, he didn't have the landscape, it had the combine. But if you take this 36 acres, in the event if I had to do something, then the natural thing would be to take the 36 and split it in 312 point somethings. Why? Because somebody could build a house on 2 acres and Cuba 10.
Yeah.
Then you've got 3 mini farms. Again,
All right,
as long as my heart's beating, this would not be chopped up.
I got you. All right, gentlemen.
I make a motion to approve with the condition that P and Z put on.
I have a motion by Commissioner Adams.
What again was that?
And what,
Let me read it. It's, the board voted to approve rezone the 17.97 acre property from A1 to AR to allow the property to be split into 2 tracts, one containing 15.63 acres and the other 2.34 acres, with the condition that the 15.63 acre tract could only be split 2 times.
Oh, okay, so it's 2 on the 15.63.
Yeah.
And we're happy with that.
End up being
Okay,
split.
I didn't remember how
Yeah.
the phrase.
That's it, we're good. See, and if we, I wasn't clear whether this included his.
Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't know it yet.
Okay, so we're good then.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Second motion.
Yeah. So,
Well, we just burned 30 minutes for nothing.
got both things.
I have a motion, second by Commissioner Doster. Any other discussion, gentlemen? I think we got it. All right, Dennis, it's on you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Number 5. Thank you, gentlemen. Question to rezone. It's 46.14 acre property from A1 to A2 to allow the property to be split into 2 tracts, one containing 36.13 acres and the other's 10.1 acres. The property is located on Leon Ellis Road, East Commerce Road on map 16, parcel 6402 in District 1. The P&Z board voted to recommend approval.
thank you, sir. Unanimously.
Yes.
Anyone here to speak in favor of?
Very quickly, it's 10.01 acres, just enough to qualify for conservation.
Okay, 10.01, that's fine. All right, thank you, sir.
Otherwise available to answer questions if needed.
And I'm covering the bases, go dogs.
You told us everything but that. I was waiting on you. All right, gentlemen. Anyone here to speak in opposition of it? Hearing none, we'll bring it back before the board. Gentlemen, I ask for a motion.
I make a motion to be approved.
Second motion.
Don't want to fight up. Okay, Commissioner, I'm gonna give this to him. Commissioner Adams to approve, second by Commissioner May. Any other discussion, gentlemen? Hearing none. Terry Chandler?
Yes.
Thank you, gentlemen. Old business to discuss liquor by the drink ordinance. This will be from Mike Pruitt. Good job. Thank y'all.
God bless America.
That's what I was thinking while we were doing it.
Yes.
You had to miss something the other day.
Think about it. Going to be split into 2, not split twice.
That all goes down to how the minutes were taken at P and Z. I wasn't clear they were gonna go down that way, but apparently they did. So that's fine.
She read it. Yeah, I'm glad you read it. If we'd asked you to read it to begin with, it doesn't been done. We'd all be home eating sandwiches.
I read it the same way. My hot dogs get cold.
All right, liquor by the drink.
Yes, sir, since the referendum, was approved, so that authorizes you to, allow sales of liquor by the drink. So it was rather painstaking because we have hundreds of references to beer and wine, malt beverages and wine and so forth. But I think what you have in front of you, I hope I have found, and changed. Some of them stayed the same because there were some parts that have different provisions for beer, malt beverages and wine versus distilled spirits by the drink. Excise tax is one that comes to mind, so, that had some more revision to it, but, anyway. What you have in front of you, I think, is internally consistent. I think it's just for discussion tonight and vote at the next meeting, so.
Well, Mike, I appreciate it. I know this has bounced back between you all. I've kissed the emails. Christina, again, thank you for your part. It just goes to show you what kind of good team we got. Gentlemen, discuss the local option sales tax distribution. We're gonna have to get, all the city mayors back in to sign a new decree, I guess you say, or an agreement.
Did you have to get the ruling from DOR yet?
No.
Okay.
But our deadline will probably start tomorrow.
Yeah, I talked to the council there, and he assured us he'd get it to it. He said he hoped he would have it here today, but if not, it will be soon. He said he would not delay us on that, and I think we all pretty well know that it's going to come back, that Hull is not a qualified municipality, so, I think the vote that would be asked for tonight is to authorize the chairman and clerk to execute a new certificate, that does not include Hull as a qualifying municipality, if that is the ruling we receive.
Exactly. We cautiously say that because of the way our meetings fall. We're having to present this as a discussion. We do not have the final answer yet. We're presuming that it will be a no. We hope not, but if it does, we have to be ready to act. So we will keep the original document signed. If Hull is allowed, then we will submit that document. If the findings is Hull is not allowed, then we will recalculate and have all mayors sign it.
The recalculation will just be the county would absorb the 1.5% from Hull. The cities are already getting above and beyond what the state's recommended, the percentage they receive.
Right.
Do you have a timeline on when this will be resolved?
We have a timeline that has to be done.
December 30th, or nobody receives.
That's right.
Yeah.
Do we need to go ahead and make that motion tonight?
Well, do you want to, I mean, that's up to the chairman.
I would request that, because if we, in 1 week from now, we get the final rule and they say yes, then we can move forward with the document for signatures, and we don't have to gather again.
That's gonna be the hard part, is getting all the mayors in to sign it.
It's valuable,
Yeah. I mean, I'll drive it to them.
That's just questions, if, like a lot of contracts, it'll say, you know, if it's not allowed by law, that part gets struck, and the rest of the contract stays in place. If somebody comes back, or a judge comes back and says, oh, it's zero, do they just, can that stand without just, and then we just absorb the, and I'm asking, do we have to do anything, is my question?
We do. We have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I asked that because I was hoping that was the case, but it wasn't.
But we can go back and amend the certificate, like we submit it to the state, and let's say May or June next year, Hull gets all their stuff together, we can amend this distribution and give them back their percentage.
That part's true, yeah. Yeah, but we have this December 30th deadline, so the DOR both set the deadline and they rule on who's a qualified municipality, so they know they gotta let us go.
That's right.
I put the motion before the group, pending the decision. If Hull is declared not eligible, we give the chairman and the clerk the authority to rewrite the contract.
Good motion. Motion by Commissioner Chandler. Do I have a second? Second by Commissioner May. Any discussion, gentlemen?
Just for clarity, the authorization to rewrite would just be to remove Hull.
Correct. And then absorb the rest, theirs back into the county. Yeah. Yeah, and just, I guess, to say out loud, but it wasn't just Hull that was singled out. There was a DOR ruling back in May that brought several cities into question, and they have okayed all of them except Hull. Hull is different because even though the DOR has now said contracted services do qualify, Hull doesn't even have 3 services through contract, so.
Yeah, we questioned 4 cities, 4
Yeah.
municipalities.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, 4 out of the 6, but that's not just Madison County. According to DOR and ACCG, this year, probably 1/3 of the state was looked at. There were people all over the state calling in, asking for the same thing. I think DOR will change the inevitable verbiage in the qualifications in the future, so this is avoided, which could have been, but that's okay. We worked with it.
Yeah.
All right. Still need that final vote. It's on there. Is that right?
Yes.
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 Yeah. All right. Thank you. New business, discuss the 2023 beer and wine application. Gentlemen, you have it before you. Lacey put this together.
So we had 1 new license applied for, that was the Boss Dog Barbecue. The rest are all renewal applications. Everybody has submitted everything that's required except for La Cabana. They were mailed a letter and then they came in to pick up the renewal application and they have not returned anything. We have spoke to them. They did come in and we did explain that they will not be able to sell any beer or wine, alcohol, anything starting January 1st.
Yeah.
So, but everything else is to date and everything's good.
As Victor can attest, new rules went into effect January 2021. And it has complicated a beer and wine license. It has complicated the store owners, anybody doing distribution. It's not only now a compliance through the county, now you gotta go to a whole nother website and do the states, and then you gotta bring that copies to the county, and it has caused mass confusion. I'm surprised there's not more than just one, but I know Lacey has tried to walk everybody through step by step, but it is a very, very complicated process that the state created for this.
So the next meeting, I'll provide you a list with all of them except for La Cabana, so everybody met all the requirements.
Deadline is passed for the.
Yes. And I have called them on cell phones that I have, and I have talked to them in person in my office. And I explained the late fee process, I explained no beer after January 1st. They clearly understood that.
I just don't want any posts to get out there on Facebook that Madison County turned these down because they didn't get the paperwork in, and you're gonna hear them. I did get it in. You got one portion. You did not get it all.
But they
Was
haven't
not
turned in
complete.
anything. La Cabana has not turned in nothing.
Even at the state level?
Now that it's,
Okay.
I
Maybe their
can't
intention.
shape the state level, but they haven't even turned in our paper application.
Okay.
Like the website, the ALP portal, that's confusing, and we've had, store owners bring their laptops in, and we've sat down and at their computer and helped them fill it all out, just walk them through that process, but.
Now, the La Cabana, is that Comer?
The Culver, I think it's the
Culver.
Culver location.
Okay, Comer.
Yeah.
All right. All right, gentlemen. This is just to discuss.
Yes. The next meeting will.
Can I go back to the drink ordinance for a quick question?
Sure.
Just remind me, who said, do we say, are those options?
Those are your discretion, no.
No, our discretion.
Your
Okay.
discretion.
Annual license fee, that was my question.
Yeah. So I think the fee on that one, Bill, was what Christina had recommended.
Yeah, that's when we rewrote it a couple months ago.
Yeah.
That's when we changed those to what was like locally surrounding county.
And I knew we talked about it, I just couldn't remember if that was one of those,
Yep.
you don't really get voice, but we do.
We did.
That's fine, thank you. I'm good.
Thank you, buddy. Consider reappointing, let's just do both of them at the same time. Consider reappointing Chris Gunnels to the Recreation Department, Board, a District 1 representative. Consider reappointing Jonathan Pugh, to the Recreation Board, District 5. We can break them out if you choose, but if there's nobody in disagreement with that, I'll ask you for it in one motion.
Will both applicants be approved for reappointment?
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Chandler, second by Commissioner Adams. Any discussion, gentlemen?
Appreciate people volunteering.
Guarantee it. Thank you. Dennis?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Both of them is good guys, good at it. They do a good job with it. Urgent matters. I know of any, none. Executive session to discuss real estate acquisition, personal matters, and potential litigations.
Yes, sir.
Derek Doster.
So moved adjourned.
I'm glad you were back. We didn't stop.
We started off on Frank last time. He said so moved.
It was a very lengthy meeting.
We were all afraid to lose. You ain't on good.
That was lengthy.
Okay. We have a hearing. We have a golf.
I'll like hear it like I'm.
Down the road.
What?
Well,